Joining us now is Democratic Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz of Florida, member of the House Committee on Appropriations. Congresswoman, it's great seeing you always. This morning,
thank you.
Speaker Johnson was asked whether he supports the president's comments. Here's what he had to say just a little while ago.
Yeah, we're trying to get the details of it, but I think this is a good development. We have to back Israel 100%, and so whatever form that takes, we're interested in having that discussion. But it was a surprising development, but I think it's one that we'll applaud. So.
What was your reaction to all of this, Congresswoman?
Well, Jose, first of all, I'm so sorry to hear about the loss of your beloved Uncle Waldo. I know
thank you.
It's gotta
thank you
be
so
tough.
much.
I mean, let's just be clear. Hamas is a brutal terrorist organization that fanatically attacked Israel, killed 1,200 of her citizens, took 250 captive, and we have 79 hostages that remain in Gaza, still being held captive. And after this first phase of ceasefire and hostage release, we have to make sure that all the hostages are able to be returned home to their families. And so my reaction was, what are we doing to make sure that it is more likely, not less likely, that all the hostages come home and that we can start down the pathway of returning to the Abraham Accords process that was in the midst of normalizing relationships between Israel and her Arab neighbors, including and especially Saudi Arabia. I was in the region on October 7th, you may remember, Jose. Mm-hmm. I have returned to the region and visited many of those Arab countries, including Israel, multiple times since then, and I'm going back in April on a bipartisan codal. And I co-chair this Congress, the Abraham Accords caucus. So we have to make sure that we're not doing anything that is going to make normalization between Israel and her Arab neighbors less likely rather than more likely. And we don't need to do something that emboldens Hamas and allows them to recruit even more generations of terrorists who are hell-bent on Israel's destruction and the destruction of the Jewish people. And that's what this proposal would incite in terms of the reaction and the destabilizing force that pursuing this idea would have.
This morning, White House National Security Advisor Mike Waltz was asked if the president's comments meant the end of the United States support for a two-state solution. Here's what he had to say.
I don't think certainly didn't hear the president say it was the end of the two-state solution. You have the Palestinian Authority. You have the West Bank. And when he was asked directly who is going to live there in the future, he said the Palestinians and perhaps many others.
Congressman, and I just want you, if you would, to expand on what you were just saying, because we're just entering right now, the world is, this second phase of the negotiations between Israel and Hamas to continue, hopefully bringing those hostages back out of Gaza. What kind of effect do you think all of this talk here could play on those negotiations?
I think that they would place those negotiations in serious jeopardy. If you listen to the statements of the Crown Prince, the Prime Minister of Saudi Arabia, who I've had the opportunity to meet with, and who is absolutely committed to normalization with Israel, they've made very clear that, I mean, it doesn't need to be an overnight transformation that a Palestinian state is achieved, but that a pathway to statehood for the Palestinians needs to be a part of the process. I mean, the president's proposal is unrealistic, is basically impossible. You do not have countries in the region who are willing to take the Palestinians, and we have to make sure that we work together to establish an orderly process of rebuilding Gaza so that we can ensure that Israel and Israelis are more safe, not less safe. We don't need to inflame another generation of terrorists hell-bent on Israel's and Jews' destruction. And you know, that's why Lindsey Graham and Josh Hawley and even Trump's, the facial expression on Susie Wiles, Trump's chief of staff's face yesterday, were appalled and said that this is a proposal that is entirely unhelpful.
Congressman, meanwhile, the Trump administration, as you know, revoked temporary protected status for almost 350,000 Venezuelans who arrived in the U.S. recently, leaving them open essentially in the future to deportations. I know you represent thousands of Venezuelan Americans in your district.
Yes.
What do you say to them?
Jose, the fact that the Homeland Security Secretary...
And still I rise, Mr. Speaker. And I rise today, Mr. Speaker, with a to whom it may concern message. To whom it may concern, ethnic cleansing in Gaza is not a joke, especially when it emanates from the President of the United States, the most powerful person in the world, when he has the ability to perfect what he says. Ethnic cleansing in Gaza is no joke, and the Prime Minister of Israel should be ashamed, knowing the history of his people, to stand there and allow such things to be said. Ethnic cleansing has been a crime against humanity. And I stand here today in the well to denounce what was said, to denounce what the President said, to denounce the complicity of the Prime Minister of Israel, and to remind people that Dr. King was right. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And injustice in Gaza is a threat to justice in the United States of America. I rise to announce that the movement to impeach the president has begun. I rise to announce that I will bring articles of impeachment against the president for dastardly deeds proposed and dastardly deeds done. I also rise to say that the impeachment movement is going to be a grass-up movement, not a top-down. The people have got to move forward. The people have to demand it. And when the people demand it, it will be done. I did it before. I laid the foundation for impeachment, and it was done. Nobody knows more about it than I. And I know that it's time for us to lay the foundation again. On some issues, it is better to stand alone than not stand at all. On this issue, I stand alone, but I stand for justice. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. Members are reminded to refrain from engaging in personalities toward the president.
And from Johnson, we saw a tweet from Republican Congresswoman Nancy Mace posting, "Let's turn Gaza into Mar-a-Lago." And of course, some of these same members were against aid for Ukraine, but they're willing to go along with this?
But look, it becomes clear that some of these members, they really don't have any responsibility for themselves and the responsibility for which they took their oath of office. So whatever Donald Trump says, no matter how foolish it may be, no matter how silly it may be, they will agree to it. That's clear. They don't want to take care of their legislative responsibilities. Because if you did, many of the things that Donald Trump currently is doing is against the law. It's against bills that we passed in the United States Congress. And now, without even coming back to Congress, without even talking to us at all, you're going to have an individual who says that no matter what we did, no matter what laws were passed, he is now the king, and so therefore he is going to determine what is. And as opposed to us doing our legislative responsibility, because who needs someone to be in a legislative body if you don't do your responsibility and you just do what the president says without regard to whether it makes any sense or not? That's what happens in Russia, by the way. If you look at the Russia parliamentary proceeding, it doesn't mean anything, because the only thing that means anything is what Putin says. That's what happens in China, by the way. Because the dictator there is what he says, not what the legislative body says. There is no check and balance. That's just a setup to have some people in there. That's not who we are as the United States of America. That's not who the American people is. American people understand that we can't have an Elon Musk going into our records, getting into our privacy with a 19-year-old. It's national security interest to us and to everything that we stand for as members of the United States Congress and as people and citizens of the United States of America.
Congressman, let me ask you more about Elon Musk here. I know you were among House ranking members who wrote a letter to the president asking for information on potential Doge access to classified information in the Treasury Department. Can you walk us through what you're hoping to find out?
Yeah, look, what are they looking for and why and who are they? Do they have any clearance? You know, you're talking about very important and sensitive personal data and information. And so you have someone who's unelected, the rich billionaire, so he's an oligarch, coming in with a 19-year-old and others that are younger, accessing private information. And we've been talking about China coming in and dealing with private information. And now internally we're going to have this. What for? What are they going to utilize it for? What medical records are at stake? Social Security payments, disability payments. These are all private information of American citizens that this man is moving into with 19-year-olds who have no clearance, no information, no wine, or anything of that nature. That is insane. And we, as a member of the United States Congress, all of us, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, should be standing up and speaking in one voice and say, we are not going to allow that to happen.
Folks, I don't have too much more to add. I brought you a mixture there of reaction from Democratic Congress people on the growing international threat that Trump poses, but also the first official move to impeach Donald Trump. And this is, it's entirely justified. It is. It didn't happen day one. They weren't doing it like Marjorie Taylor Greene tried to do to Biden on his first or second day in office. Trump's been given an opportunity to govern and see if he could follow the rules. I know it was insane to even think he would. But, hypothetically, he deserved a chance, I guess, right? But he failed. And he's demonstrated that when it comes to both domestic policy, but also international law, the man is a renegade. Look at how he treated Canada. His tariff threat, even though he's backed down on it to Mexico and Canada, that's a violation of his own trade deal. You're not supposed to create just new tariffs out of nowhere. That's a violation of that deal, a deal that was ratified by Congress. The way he's treating Denmark and Norway and Greenland is a violation of probably NATO rules, being aggressive towards a fellow NATO ally. And now his move in Gaza is the textbook definition of ethnic cleansing. Right? And so no wonder Democrats have moved to impeach him. This is good to see.